Hi everybody, my name is Dustin Schell. I'm a staff engineer with the Fuels and Transportation Division with CEC. And my job is EV charging reliability from overseas. And today I'm going to be talking about proposed set of regulations. They've been in proposed form for almost 2 years now. And we're hoping to get rolling on a formal rulemaking process pretty soon and finalize those. I'll get to that in a minute. So just kind of a bit of an agenda here. We'll go through some background. We'll focus primarily in this presentation on the requirements. We'll go over some performance standards that are proposed also in that regulation, and also third-party data sharing requirements as well. So, background, we proposed new regulations. They're tracking the inventory of chargers in California, utilization. Oh, sorry guys. The utilization of those chargers and also the reliability of those chargers in California. I didn't think this audience would be that concerned with it, but we're using sort of a variety of different legal authorities to come to this. It's not all strictly related to AB 2016. I'm happy to answer questions about that, but I'll leave it there. Beyond that, the proposed regulations also set reliability standards, which are performance standards for chargers that are publicly funded in California. And we released the most recent public draft all the way back in April of 2024. Again, I'll talk a little bit more about next steps towards the end. So, sort of along the lines of the perspective or guiding light, similar to what Jeffrey proposed earlier, we're pretty committed to improving the charging experience in California, and standardization is one of the key routes that we're focusing on to improve the charging experience. So a lot of that is around standardized nomenclature, remote monitoring through OCPP in a standardized fashion, set a level playing field, setting those reliability standards in a standardized fashion, and then standardizing third-party data sharing for navigation platforms, third-party navigation platforms and routing purposes. Separately, the CEC also is developing a standardized field testing protocol that's part of a contract we have with UC Davis, where they're doing a pretty large-scale testing of all public chargers operating in California. So, reporting requirements. This is kind of the meat of this presentation. So, the reporting requirements consist of quarterly requirements for reporting on the inventory of chargers. Generally, this is location data, make and model of chargers, the connectors, the primary use case for the chargers, and those are applicable to pretty much all chargers in California with some limited exceptions, generally around single-family homes and small multi-unit dwellings. We also have proposed utilization reporting, quarterly reporting on generally what's called session-level data, and that's identifying information about the charger that can be tied back to the inventory data, plug-in, plug-out time, active charging time, energy consumed, energy discharged, and peak power. Again, those are applicable to pretty much all network chargers in California. Obviously, non-network chargers don't really track utilization. Again, there are exceptions there. I'm happy to discuss those if anybody has specific questions about the exceptions. So for reliability reporting, we also have quarterly reporting standards, and those require, generally speaking, just uptime over the quarter average, and then successful charging temp rate. Within the successful charging temp rate, which I'll get into a little bit more detail in later slides, there's also some other metrics that we're looking for: the total number of attempted charging sessions, successful charging temps, failed charging temps, etc. I apologize, that first bullet under successful charging temp rate should say total number of attempted charge, or total number of charging temps, which I guess is attempted charging sessions, but it's a little outside of the standard way we phrased it so far. Importantly, the uptime reporting only applies to, is applicable to publicly funded chargers installed on or after Jan 1 of 24. The successful charging temp rate, or STAR, is applicable to network chargers installed on or after Jan 1 of 2026. So I want to point out on that Jan 1, 2026 date, that is from the most recently published draft, or publicly available draft. That probably will update because the regulation timeline is pushed a little bit. So be on the lookout for that when the final draft is published. So uptime, we've all seen this. I don't want to dwell on the calculation here, but what I do want to point out is that we're defining uptime in terms of OCPP messages. And generally speaking, well, not generally, specifically, status notification, connector status equals unavailable or faulted until we receive a subsequent status notification message indicating that you're back in an operable condition, operative condition, would be downtime. Boot notification request would indicate downtime tracked back to the last heartbeat that was received. And then in addition to that, because we all know that there's plenty of cases where OCPP isn't, or the charger is not going to necessarily detect that it's in an inoperative state. Standard use case being a fouled connector or a broken connector. Any record that the charging network provider has or the charging station operator has that the charger is not functioning as designed will also be downtime until that's corrected. So the successful charge attempt rate is a little bit more complicated. And I guess this is probably a good time to go into this. So up until this point, from a regulatory perspective, we've seen nothing but discussions around uptime. And generally, those discussions conflate uptime with attempts to charge an electric vehicle in a charger that is functioning as it's designed, right? And from my perspective, those are two fundamentally different things. Arguably, you could say that downtime is a subset of the successful charge attempt rate, but you measure them entirely differently. One is a time-based metric, as we see here, and the other is essentially counting. You're counting how many times did you try to charge a vehicle, how many times was it successful, or how many times did it fail. So how are we going to do this, specifically using OCPP? So we define the charge attempt. Now you guys, probably everyone here will recognize pretty quickly that anyone attempting to initiate a charging session, the charger is going to transmit more than likely 4 out of 5 of these messages. Or in the case of the CMS, or CSMS, excuse me, transmitting to the charger. So any number of these charge attempts that are seen between the charger and the central system within a 3-minute period count as one charge attempt, no matter what. And that is to allow for things like seamless retry, but also to account for the fact that you're going to see multiple of these conditions, we'll say or not, because this will all come as one message, right? Or maybe 2. Regardless, the 3-minute period is intended to account for that. So once we see a charge attempt, we expect to see a charging session. Charging session is pretty easily trackable. As you can see, we've specified these conditions here. And then we define a successful charge attempt, which a successful charge attempt is a charge attempt that's followed by a charging session, controversially, that lasts for greater than or equal to 5 minutes, or meets one of the 4 conditions you'll see here. This is a little bit of an updated list. Those of you that are familiar with ChargeX will be familiar with these 4 stop reasons from their initial draft, and we updated to align with that. The reason that we went with the greater than or equal to 5 minutes as opposed to all of the stop reasons is not due to a flaw in OCPP, but rather the variability in implementation and the way those stop reasons are used. Unfortunately, there's some that are ambiguous enough that they're masking failures. And so we went with the list of stop reasons that are most unambiguously indicate success in the end of a charging session, or it needs to last greater than or equal to 5 minutes, because overwhelmingly, all data indicates that it's going to continue to be a successful charging session. You're not going to have an interruption. Going beyond that, we're also requiring the chargers installed after 1.1.26 that are using OCPP, so network chargers. I'm sorry, the applicability on this gets messy, so I keep having to go through it, but these are publicly funded chargers in California installed on or after Jan 1 of 2026. They have to automatically transmit the messages that you see here to the CEC in 60-minute batch pushes. And the purpose of this is for the CEC to be able to validate the quarterly reporting of reliability metrics and ensure that the public can be confident in the reporting that's coming into the CEC. Beyond reporting, we have the performance standards. And pretty straightforward, greater than or equal to 97% uptime, calculated quarterly, greater than or equal to 90% SCAR. Again, calculated quarterly. The lower SCAR is simply because we know that there's a not insignificant number of interoperability failures that occur to the fault of the vehicle, and so we wanted to set a little bit lower threshold to not be penalizing charging network providers because of failures on the vehicle side. Beyond that, there is a third-party data sharing requirement. Anyone that's familiar with NEVI will be familiar with their third-party data sharing requirement, and this essentially mirrors it. We had a piece of legislation passed that required us to set standards for data sharing for third-party network providers, and so this is meant to address that. I'm happy to answer questions. I don't think we need to go into more detail on that one. And with that, that's my presentation. Any questions? Yeah.
You mentioned that you're going to send 60-minute batches, these messages, their logs, right? Does it mean that they don't have to report themselves? You do the reporting?
No, they're required to report themselves as well. Okay, and a big part of that is this, because the OCPP logs that they're pushing to us won't track those failures that they're tracking through other means. So essentially what we would expect in quarterly reporting is for the uptime to be equal to what we're validating through OCPP logs or less. And so that's a big part of this. And also, you know, in a practical sense, we're probably not going to audit every single corner of every single charger that's publicly funded out there. It'll probably be more on a spot check basis. That's kind of yet to be seen. We're sort of building a plan to flag it. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Just thank you for all the charge point pictures in there.
Well, you're very welcome. We have a limited set of photos that you can use in the CEC. So. Yes, sir.
How do you prove those data that was sent from the CSMS?
Which ones?
Like the pulse time, scars. How do you prove those data? Like, isn't that just numbers that was sent from the other CEOs to CPC?
Sure. So we require quarterly reporting of the uptime for reliability, for the uptime and the successful charge attempt rate. I think your question is, how are we validating that those numbers are accurate? Yeah, so that's the purpose of the batch push of OCPP logs, specifically the messages that you see there. Because we define uptime and SCAR in terms of OCPP, it makes it so that we can validate what's being reported to us by individual entities. Anybody else? My ears are really bad, I'm sorry.
Any updates that you drafted to, or is this all in draft?
This presentation with one minor update is all based on the second draft. We're pushing hard. We hope to publish the final draft by the end of Q1. And from there, then we'll also go into the formal rulemaking process at that time. There's been some behind the scenes slowdowns, and we apologize. Anybody else? Okay, thanks everybody.